The rain pounded against my skin as I ran, each droplet feeling like tiny needles piercing through my thin coat. My breath came in short, painful bursts, creating small clouds in the frigid night air. I could still hear Ryan's voice behind me, that familiar slur in his words that always preceded the worst nights. "Olivia, don't you dare walk away from me." My heart hammered against my ribs as I ducked into an alley, the smell of garbage and wet asphalt filling my nostrils. 3 years of this cycle, his drinking, his rage, his morning apologies, and tonight, I'd finally found the courage to leave. But I hadn't anticipated the storm, or that my getaway car would fail to start, or that Ryan would arrive home early. I pressed my back against the cold brick wall, my fingers clutching the small duffel bag containing everything I could grab in the 5 minutes I had before he returned. My phone was dead. The nearest bus station was 15 blocks away, and the rain showed no signs of letting up. When I peered around the corner, I could see Ryan's silhouette moving beneath the dim streetlight, his head turning in every direction. Even from this distance, I recognized the dangerous set of his shoulders. The last time he'd looked like that, I'd ended up with 3 broken ribs and a story about falling downstairs that no one questioned. "I know you're out here somewhere," his voice carried on the wind, making me flinch. I needed to move, to get as far away as possible before he tracked me down. Wiping the rain from my eyes, I spotted it across the street. A sleek black car, engine running, no driver in sight. Someone making a quick stop at a late-night pharmacy, perhaps. The windows were tinted so dark they reflected the streetlights like obsidian mirrors. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong. But as Ryan's voice grew louder, desperation overcame my better judgment. I darted across the street, my worn sneakers splashing through puddles, and tested the passenger door. Unlocked. Without allowing myself another thought, I slipped inside and ducked below the window line, my soaked clothes immediately dampening the immaculate leather seat. The interior smelled of expensive cologne, and something subtle I couldn't place. Sandalwood, perhaps. The dashboard glowed with more buttons and screens than I'd ever seen in a car. This wasn't just any vehicle, this was wealth on wheels. A momentary pang of guilt twisted my stomach, but the sight of Ryan appearing at the mouth of the alley I'd just left solidified my decision. I'd leave a note, an apology, money to pay for the ride, anything. Once I was safe, I counted my racing heartbeats in the darkness, praying that whoever owned this car would take their time. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Ryan was moving methodically down the street now, checking doorways and alleys. I pressed myself lower into the footwell. The driver's door opened suddenly, letting in the sound of rain before closing with a soft, expensive-sounding thud. I froze, not even daring to breathe. A moment of silence followed. Had they noticed the wet marks on their seat? Could they see me? Then a voice spoke, low and controlled, with the kind of quietness that was more terrifying than any shout. "You have exactly 5 seconds to explain why you're in my car before I have Vince here remove you permanently." I slowly raised my head above the dashboard. The driver wasn't alone. A mountain of a man stood outside the driver's window, his broad shoulders blocking the streetlight, creating a halo effect around his silhouette. But it was the driver who held my attention. A man in his late 30s, perhaps, with features that seemed carved from stone. His suit was impeccably tailored, no wrinkles despite the rain. His hands rested on the steering wheel, steady, adorned with a single platinum ring on his right index finger. When our eyes met in the rearview mirror, something cold slithered down my spine. They were dark, almost black in this light, assessing me with the detached interest of someone studying an insect before deciding whether to crush it. "I'm sorry," I stammered, my voice barely audible. "I needed to hide. My ex. He's out there looking for me and I—" The man raised one hand slightly, and I fell silent immediately, my words dying in my throat. "Vince," he said, his eyes never leaving mine in the mirror. "Check the street. Tell me what you see." The hulking figure disappeared from the window. I sat up straighter, clutching my bag to my chest like a shield. Rain continued to drum on the roof, creating a deceptively soothing rhythm that contrasted with the thunder of my pulse. "I can get out now," I offered, reaching for the door handle. "I'm so sorry for the intrusion." I can pay you. Stop. The word wasn't loud, but it froze me instantly. Don't touch the door. His eyes finally broke away from mine as he glanced out the windshield. In profile, his features were sharp. A strong jaw, straight nose, dark hair trimmed perfectly. He couldn't have been much older than 40, but power radiated from him in waves, aging him in a way that had nothing to do with years. Vince returned, leaning down to the driver's window. Man about half a block down, looking into cars, checking alleys, seems agitated. The driver nodded once. Description? White male, early 30s, brown hair, medium build, leather jacket, looks drunk. Ryan. The description matched perfectly. My body tensed involuntarily. That's him, I whispered, hating how my voice trembled. That's my ex. The driver's eyes found mine in the mirror again, and this time they narrowed slightly, studying me with new interest. I became acutely aware of my appearance. Soaked hair plastered to my face, mascara probably streaked down my cheeks, the collar of my coat torn where Ryan had grabbed me earlier. Vince, the driver said after a moment, get in the back. We're leaving. My eyes widened. I should go. No. Again, that quiet command that brooked no argument. You're staying right where you are. Vince opened the rear door and slid in beside me, his massive frame making me shrink against the opposite door. The leather creaked beneath his weight. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the rain on his coat. He didn't look at me. His eyes focused straight ahead. The car pulled away from the curb smoothly, the powerful engine barely audible. As we passed Ryan on the street, I ducked my head instinctively, but the tinted windows would have hidden me anyway. I watched through the glass as my ex-boyfriend's figure grew smaller in the distance, until we turned a corner and he disappeared from view. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by a new kind of fear. I had escaped one dangerous situation only to put myself directly into another. I didn't know these men, had no idea where they were taking me, and the quiet luxury of the car suddenly felt less like sanctuary and more like a trap. Thank you for helping me get away, I ventured carefully, but you can drop me at the next corner. I don't want to trouble you further. The driver's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror again. What's your name? I hesitated, wondering if I should lie. Something told me he would know. Olivia. Olivia Reese. He nodded slightly, as if confirming something to himself. Well, Olivia Reese, you made a significant error in judgment tonight. My car is not a public taxi service. I know, and I'm truly sorry. It was a desperate decision. Desperate decisions often have unintended consequences. His voice remained even, almost conversational, which somehow made his words more menacing. Do you know who I am? I shook my head, a knot forming in my stomach. Good, he replied, turning the car onto a wide boulevard I didn't recognize. That's for the best. You can call me Mr. Castellano. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, as if I should recognize it, sent another chill through me. Where are we going, Mr. Castellano? I asked, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. Somewhere safe, he answered vaguely. Somewhere your ex won't find you. The car slowed as we approached a security gate fronting what appeared to be a luxury apartment complex. Mr. Castellano lowered his window just enough to press his thumb against a scanner. The gate slid open silently. I appreciate your concern, I said, sitting up straighter, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel, but I have plans. A friend expecting me. No, you don't. His certainty was unsettling. If you had somewhere to go, you wouldn't have been hiding in a stranger's car. I had no response to that. He was right. As the car pulled into an underground garage, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I was alone with two strange men, one of whom clearly wielded considerable power and wealth. No one knew where I was. My phone was dead. I had just traded one potentially dangerous situation for another that might be infinitely worse. The car stopped in a reserved space marked with a simple C. Mr. Castellano turned off the engine and finally turned to look at me directly. Up close, his eyes weren't black after all, but a deep, dark brown. Something in them reminded me of still water over unfathomable depths. Olivia, he said, my name sounding different in his mouth. You entered my car without permission. By most standards, that would qualify as a serious transgression. I swallowed hard. I know. And I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't erase actions, he replied, his gaze unwavering. Actions have consequences. Vince shifted beside me, a subtle reminder of his presence. What do you want from me? I asked, surprising myself with the directness of the question. The corner of Mr. Castellano's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something that hinted at amusement. For now, I want you to come upstairs. Get dry. Have something warm to drink. Then we'll discuss your situation. It wasn't a request. As if to emphasize this point, Vince opened his door and stepped out, then opened mine, standing aside expectantly. The garage was silent except for the occasional drip of water from the car's exterior. I had a choice to make, though it hardly felt like one. Step out into the unknown with these strangers, or what? Make a scene in an empty garage? Try to run, with nowhere to go and a dead phone? I clutched my duffel bag tighter and stepped out of the car, the click of the door closing behind me echoing with an awful finality. The elevator was another world of luxury. Mirrored walls, polished brass fixtures, and that new car smell that spoke of regular cleaning. Mr. Castellano stood beside me, his presence filling the small space despite his perfect stillness. Vince positioned himself just behind us, silent as a shadow, but impossible to forget. I caught glimpses of myself in the mirrored walls, bedraggled, small, and obviously out of place between these two immaculate men. My soaked clothes clung uncomfortably to my skin, and I couldn't stop a slight shiver. In the harsh elevator lighting, I noticed a bruise forming on my wrist where Ryan had grabbed me earlier. I tugged my sleeve down quickly, but not before catching Mr. Castellano's gaze flickering to the discoloration, and then away, his expression unchanged. The elevator didn't stop until we reached the penthouse level. Of course it would be the penthouse. The doors slid open to reveal a private foyer, with gleaming marble floors and art that looked expensive enough to fund my entire existence. This way, Mr. Castellano said, stepping out first. I hesitated, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what I was doing. Following a stranger, clearly a powerful, dangerous stranger, into his private domain. Every warning I'd ever heard screamed through my mind. Second thoughts, Ms. Reese? He asked without turning around, somehow sensing my hesitation. I don't think I should be here, I managed to say, my voice smaller than I intended. He turned then, studying me with those dark, unfathomable eyes. You made that decision when you chose my car as your hiding place. Now we deal with the consequences. He gestured forward. After you. Vince's solid presence behind me made it clear this wasn't a negotiation. I stepped into the foyer, my wet sneakers squeaking embarrassingly against the pristine floor. The apartment beyond was exactly what you'd expect from someone like Mr. Castellano, spacious, minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city lights glittering through the rain. Everything was in shades of black, white, and gray, with occasional touches of deep blue. It wasn't just decorated, it was curated. Nothing out of place, nothing personal or revealing. Vince, wait outside, Mr. Castellano said, and the mountain of a man nodded once before retreating to the foyer, closing the heavy doors behind him. Alone with Mr. Castellano, my anxiety spiked. I stood dripping on his immaculate floor, clutching my pathetic duffel bag, feeling like a stray animal that had somehow wandered into a palace. You're soaking wet, he observed, his tone matter-of-fact. The bathroom is through there. You'll find towels, a robe. Leave your clothes outside the door. They'll be taken care of. I blinked at him. Taken care of? Dried, cleaned. His eyes narrowed slightly. Is that a problem? No, I just what? Didn't want to be naked in a stranger's home. Didn't trust whatever taken care of might actually mean. I have some clothes in my bag. He nodded once. Fine. Go change. It wasn't kindness in his voice, more like impatience, or perhaps just practicality. I headed in the direction he'd indicated, passing through a spacious bedroom that, like the rest of the place, revealed nothing personal about its occupant. The attached bathroom was larger than my entire studio apartment, all marble and glass, with a shower that had more jets and controls than I knew what to do with. I locked the door behind me, leaning against it for a moment as I tried to gather my thoughts. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, pale, with dark circles under her eyes, wet hair plastered to her skull. A small cut on my cheekbone was beginning to swell where Ryan had struck me when I'd told him I was leaving. I touched it gingerly, wincing. The warm shower was a temptation I couldn't resist, though I rushed through it, afraid to keep Mr. Castellano waiting. I pulled clean clothes from my bag, just jeans and a simple sweater, nothing that matched the elegance of this place. After combing through my wet hair with my fingers, I reluctantly unlocked the door and stepped back into the bedroom. Mr. Castellano wasn't there, thankfully. I found him in the main living area, standing by the windows, looking out at the city. He'd removed his suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his crisp white shirt, revealing strong forearms dusted with dark hair. A glass of amber liquid rested in his hand. "Better?" he asked without turning. "Yes, thank you." I hovered awkwardly at the edge of the room, unsure of my place in this strange scenario. He turned then, his eyes taking me in with a quick, assessing glance. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the sleek sofas. "Would you like a drink?" I shook my head as I perched on the edge of the sofa. "No, thank you." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? You seem like you could use one." "I'm sure," I said firmly. The last thing I needed was alcohol clouding my judgment. "Mr. Castellano, I appreciate the bathroom and everything, but I really should go." He took a seat in an armchair across from me, crossing one leg over the other with casual elegance. "Go where, exactly?" The question hung in the air between us, unanswerable. I had no place to go. That was the whole problem. "I'll figure something out," I said, lifting my chin slightly. "I always do." He took a sip of his drink, watching me over the rim of the glass. The bruises suggest otherwise. My hand instinctively went to my cheek. "That's not—" "Don't lie to me, Olivia." His voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. I despised dishonesty. I fell silent, unsure how to respond. "How long?" he asked after a moment. "How long what? How long has he been hitting you?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. No one had ever asked so bluntly before. 3 years, I answered before I could stop myself, but not at first. It wasn't always like that. Mr. Castellano's expression didn't change, but something darkened in his eyes. "It never is." He set his glass down. "Are you hungry?" The abrupt change of subject disoriented me. No, I'm fine." Another lie. He stood up in one fluid motion. "You're thin, too thin, and your hands haven't stopped shaking since you got in my car. Food first, then we talk." He moved toward what I assumed was the kitchen, clearly expecting me to follow. After a moment's hesitation, I did, trailing behind him like a lost puppy. The kitchen was a chef's dream, all stainless steel and marble, with professional-grade appliances. Mr. Castellano moved through it with surprising familiarity, opening the massive refrigerator and examining its contents. "You cook?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Occasionally, when the mood strikes." He pulled out ingredients with efficient movements. "Sit." I slid onto one of the high stools at the counter, watching as he began preparing something simple. An omelet, I realized, with what looked like prosciutto and some kind of expensive cheese. "I take it Ryan is the ex you were running from," he said as he worked, not looking at me. I stiffened at the sound of Ryan's name from his lips. "How did you—" "You said his name in the car." He cracked eggs into a bowl with one-handed precision. "Tell me about him." It wasn't a request. I found myself speaking almost against my will. "We met 3 years ago. I was waitressing at a restaurant he frequented. He was charming, attentive, said all the right things. The familiar story sounded pathetic to my own ears. 6 months in, he lost his temper for the first time, threw a glass against the wall, apologized profusely afterward, blamed work stress, promised it would never happen again." "But it did," Mr. Castellano said, his back still to me. "Yes, and got worse. He controlled everything. Who I saw, where I worked, what I wore. I traced a pattern on the marble countertop with my finger. I tried to leave twice before. The first time he found me at my friend's place. The second time—" I swallowed hard. "The second time I ended up in the hospital with broken ribs. He convinced everyone I'd fallen downstairs." Mr. Castellano turned, sliding a plate in front of me. The omelet was perfect, golden brown and fluffy. "Eat," he commanded. I picked up the fork he offered, taking a small bite. It was delicious, of course. Why are you helping me? I asked after swallowing. You don't know me. I broke into your car. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed over his chest. Let's say I have a particular distaste for men who abuse women. Something in his tone suggested a story there, but his expression made it clear that pursuing it would be unwise. He watched me eat with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but instead felt oddly like care? No, that couldn't be right. This man didn't know me, didn't care about me. What do you do, Mr. Castellano? I asked, trying to redirect the conversation. I acquire things, he replied vaguely. Businesses, primarily. I solve problems. What kind of problems? His eyes met mine, and there was that almost smile again, the kind that require permanent solutions. A chill ran down my spine. There was nothing veiled about the threat in those words. And what kind of permanent solution do you have in mind for my situation? I asked, setting down my fork. That depends, he said, straightening up. What do you want, Olivia? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? Safety, freedom, a life without looking over my shoulder. I want Ryan to leave me alone, I said finally. I want to not be afraid anymore. Mr. Castellano nodded, as if my answer confirmed something for him. Finish eating. Then we'll discuss options. I did as he asked, though my appetite had diminished. When I was done, he took the plate without comment and placed it in the sink. Come, he said, leading me back to the living room. As we passed through, I noticed something I'd missed before. A small, framed photograph on an otherwise bare shelf. A woman, beautiful and dark-haired, smiling at the camera, the only personal touch in the entire apartment. Mr. Castellano saw me looking and his face hardened momentarily before he gestured for me to sit. Your options are limited, he said, remaining standing this time, hands in his pockets. You have no money, no place to go, and a man who has demonstrated he will hurt you if he finds you. Put like that, my situation sounded impossibly bleak. I'll manage, I said, though the words rang hollow even to my own ears. You won't, he countered flatly. He'll find you. They always do. Then what do you suggest? I asked, frustration bleeding into my voice. He regarded me for a long moment. I can offer you protection. I blinked at him. Protection? A place to stay, financial support, security. He listed these things as if they were trivial offerings. Time to get back on your feet without looking over your shoulder. And what would you want in return? I asked, suspicion coloring my tone. Men like Mr. Castellano didn't offer help without expecting something in return. Company, he said simply. I stiffened, my mind immediately jumping to the obvious conclusion. I'm not that kind of company, he interrupted, his expression hardening. I'm not propositioning you, Ms. Reese. I'm offering you a job. A job? I repeated, confused. Doing what? I host business dinners, attend events. I require someone presentable on my arm, someone who can smile, make pleasant conversation, and otherwise remain inconspicuous. He studied me with that assessing gaze again. You're intelligent, observant. You'd adapt quickly. You want me to pretend to be your, what? Girlfriend? When necessary, he confirmed. A simple arrangement. You play a role in public, and in return you get safety, comfort, and my guarantee that Ryan will never touch you again. The offer hung in the air between us, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Why me? I asked finally. You could hire anyone for that. Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. Let's call it convenient timing. You needed help. I needed a companion who isn't entangled in my world. It sounded rehearsed, too neat. There was more to it, but I couldn't imagine what. I don't know anything about your world, I pointed out. Precisely the point, he replied. You bring no complications, no prior knowledge, no connections that could be problematic. A knock at the door interrupted us. Mr. Castellano moved to answer it, speaking briefly with someone outside, Vince, I assumed, before returning with a slim folder in his hand. Your ex-boyfriend, he said, placing the folder on the coffee table between us. Ryan Michael Jenkins, 32, 3 previous complaints of domestic violence, all dropped. Currently employed at Meridian Financial as a mid-level manager. Lives at 1837 Westlake Avenue, apartment 4B. Has a gambling problem he hides rather poorly, and owes money to some particularly unpleasant individuals. I stared at him, my mouth hanging open slightly. How did you— It's what I do, he said simply. Knowledge is power, Olivia. The casual display of that power sent another chill through me. In the short time I'd been in his bathroom, he'd compiled a dossier on Ryan. What else could he do? What else did he know? Who are you? I whispered. His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. Someone who can make your problem disappear. Permanently, if that's what you want. The implication was clear. My blood ran cold. No, I said quickly. I don't want that. He nodded once as if he'd been testing me. Then we understand each other. My offer stands. Protection, security, in exchange for your discretion and companionship. A simple transaction. Simple. Nothing about this situation was simple. How long? I asked. 6 months, he replied without hesitation. After that, if you wish to leave, I'll ensure you have the means to start fresh. New identity, new location. Enough money to be comfortable. It sounded too good to be true. It probably was. But what choice did I have? Go back out into the rain with nowhere to go? Waiting for Ryan to find me? Or accept this devil's bargain with a man who radiated danger, but who, at least so far, had shown me nothing but a cold sort of courtesy? I need to think, I said finally. Mr. Castellano checked his watch. Platinum, like his ring. You have until morning. I'll have a room prepared for you. We'll finalize our arrangement over breakfast. Another knock at the door. This time when Mr. Castellano answered it, a woman entered, middle-aged, with a kind face that seemed at odds with this sterile environment. This is Mrs. Chen, Mr. Castellano said. She'll show you to your room and provide anything you need. The woman smiled at me, and I found myself returning it weakly. Rest well, Olivia, Mr. Castellano said, his tone making it clear that our conversation was over for now. Tomorrow we begin. As I followed Mrs. Chen down a hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a deal with the devil, one I didn't fully understand, with terms I hadn't agreed to yet, but a deal nonetheless. And the strangest part was the flicker of relief that came with it. For the first time in years, I felt safe. I just didn't know what that safety would ultimately cost me. The guest room was like something from a luxury hotel. King-sized bed with silky sheets, another breathtaking view of the city, and an ensuite bathroom that rivaled the one I'd used earlier. Mrs. Chen showed me around with quiet efficiency, pointing out the intercom system. The closet already stocked with brand new clothes, all in my size, which was disturbing to contemplate, and the tablet on the nightstand. For anything you need, she explained in accented English. Food, entertainment, questions. Just type here. She demonstrated with quick, practiced movements. Mr. Castellano values privacy. This way, you don't need to disturb. Does Mr. Castellano have many guests? I ventured, trying to understand what I'd stumbled into. Mrs. Chen's expression remained neutral. I take care of household only, 2 years now. She headed for the door, pausing before she left. You're safe here, she added, her eyes softening momentarily. Sleep now. Alone in the enormous room, I sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the day crashing over me in waves. 24 hours ago, I'd been in the apartment I shared with Ryan, planning my escape in stolen moments when he wasn't watching. Now, I was in a penthouse belonging to a man who exuded power and danger in equal measure, considering an offer that felt equally like salvation and captivity. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me. I explored the room, running my fingers over expensive fabrics, opening drawers that contained items I might need, all new, all pristine. In the closet, I found clothes in various styles, from casual to formal, none with tags but all unworn. The precision of it all unnerved me. How had he arranged this so quickly? Had he been expecting someone, or was this level of preparation simply normal for a man like Mr. Castellano? The tablet on the nightstand glowed with a simple interface. Out of curiosity, I tapped on the section labeled Information. A document appeared. A contract, I realized with a jolt. The agreement Mr. Castellano had outlined, formalized in legal language. 6 months of companionship services, in exchange for protection, housing, and a new identity afterward. The terms were surprisingly straightforward, listing expectations for public appearances, confidentiality requirements, and even a generous monthly stipend that would be held in trust until the contract's completion. What caught my eye, however, was the section labeled termination clauses. Either party could end the arrangement before the 6-month period, but doing so would forfeit all financial benefits for me. And there, in coldly clinical language, the protector, hereafter Castellano, reserves the right to terminate agreement in case of breach of confidentiality, with such termination to be absolute and final. The word sent a chill down my spine. Absolute and final. There was no mistaking the threat embedded in that phrasing. I set the tablet down, my hands trembling slightly. What had I gotten myself into? Who was this man who could produce detailed dossiers and legal contracts at a moment's notice? The obvious answer hovered at the edges of my consciousness, but I pushed it away. Better not to know. Better not to name it. Sleep eventually claimed me, but it was fitful, filled with dreams of running down endless corridors, pursued by shadowy figures, sometimes Ryan, sometimes the stoic Vince, and sometimes Mr. All. Castellano himself, watching with those dark, unfathomable eyes. Morning arrived with a soft chime from the tablet. 7 a.m. A message glowed on the screen. Breakfast in the dining room at 8:00. Appropriate attire has been laid out. I showered again, letting the hot water ease the tension in my muscles. In the closet, I found a simple white blouse and tailored black pants set apart from the other clothes. The subtle command was clear. This was what I was expected to wear. I dressed slowly, noting how perfectly the clothes fit, as if they'd been tailored specifically for me. Another unsettling detail. At precisely 8:00, I made my way to the dining room, following the path I remembered from the previous night. Mr. Castellano was already seated at the head of a table that could comfortably seat 12, a newspaper spread before him. He wore another immaculate suit, this one a deep navy. He didn't look up as I entered. "Good morning," I said, hovering in the doorway. He folded the newspaper and set it aside, his eyes moving over me with that same assessing gaze. "You slept poorly," he observed. I touched my face self-consciously, wondering if the dark circles under my eyes were that obvious. "It's been an eventful 24 hours. He nodded toward the chair to his right. "Sit. Coffee?" I took the offered seat, noticing the fine china place settings and the spread of breakfast foods arranged on the table. "Yes, please." He poured from a silver carafe, his movements precise. "Did you review the contract?" So we were getting straight to business. "I did." "And?" He handed me the cup, our fingers briefly touching in the exchange. His were warm, steady. I took a sip of the coffee, rich, expensive, perfectly brewed. "The terms seem clear," I said carefully, "but I have questions. I would be disappointed if you didn't." Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. "Ask." I set the cup down. "Who are you, really? What do you do that requires this kind of arrangement?" His expression remained impassive. "I told you. I acquire businesses. I solve problems." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." His tone was final. "Next question." I suppressed a flare of frustration. "The clothes, the contract, this whole setup. How did you arrange it all so quickly?" "I'm efficient," he replied. "And I have resources. So I'm not the first person you've made this offer to," I concluded. Something darkened in his expression. "You would be mistaken in that assumption." His answer surprised me. Then why me? Why now? Mr. Castellano studied me for a long moment. "Let's call it a confluence of timing and circumstance. You needed help. I had a particular requirement." He reached for a plate, serving himself eggs and toast with methodical precision. "Help yourself." I did, though my appetite was minimal. "What exactly will I be expected to do as your companion?" "Accompany me to business dinners, charity events, social occasions. Smile, make appropriate conversation, observe but don't intrude." He cut his toast into perfect squares. "In public, you'll be introduced as my partner. The nature of that partnership will remain deliberately ambiguous." "And in private?" I asked. unable to keep a note of wariness from my voice. His eyes met mine. In private, we maintain a professional relationship. You'll have your space, your privacy. I'll have mine. We'll interact as needed to maintain the illusion for any staff or visitors. The termination clause, I said after a moment. It's rather ominous. It's necessary, he replied without elaboration. What happens if I say no to all this? He set down his fork, giving me his full attention. Then Mrs. Chen will provide you with enough money for temporary accommodations and transportation. You'll leave, and we'll never speak again. He paused. And you'll be on your own when Ryan inevitably finds you. The casual mention of Ryan's name made my stomach clench. You make it sound like a certainty. It is. His voice was matter of fact. Men like him don't let go easily. They can't bear to lose what they consider their property. The word property struck a nerve. I'm not property, I said sharply. Not his, not yours. Something that might have been respect flashed across Mr. Castellanos' face. No, he agreed. You're not, which is why my offer comes with no physical obligations or expectations. Your body remains entirely your own. I pushed my barely touched plate away. Why do I feel like there's something you're not telling me? Some reason you've singled me out for this arrangement? Mr. Castellanos' expression shuddered. You're overthinking. The situation is exactly as I've presented it. He was lying. I was certain of it. There was more to this than he was saying, but I couldn't imagine what it might be. What possible interest could a man like him have in someone like me? If I accept, I said slowly, I want one addition to the contract. His eyebrow raised slightly, which is? I want to work. A real job. Not just playing your arm candy. I have a degree in graphic design that I've never been able to use because Ryan... I stopped, taking a breath. I need something that's mine, something I can take with me after our arrangement ends. Mr. Castellano considered this for a moment. My company has a design department. I can arrange an entry-level position. Your performance will determine your advancement, not our arrangement. The ease with which he agreed surprised me. Thank you. He nodded once. Is that your only condition? I thought for a moment. One more thing. I want to know that Ryan won't hurt anyone else after I'm gone. Not necessarily permanent, like you suggested, but something to ensure he doesn't just move on to his next victim. A cold smile touched Mr. Castellanos' lips. That can be arranged, quite easily. Something in his tone made me shiver. Nothing illegal, I added quickly. Of course not, he agreed, though the smile remained. Do we have an agreement, Olivia? This was it. The moment of decision. I could walk away now, take my chances on my own, or I could accept this devil's bargain, this gilded cage with its promise of safety and eventual freedom. Yes, I said finally. We have an agreement. Mr. Castellano extended his hand across the table. I took it, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. We shook once, formally, like business partners sealing a deal. The contract will be updated with your additions and ready for your signature this afternoon, he said, releasing my hand. In the meantime, there are matters we should discuss, practical considerations for our arrangement. Such as? Your background story, for one, how we met, how long we've been together. He took a sip of his coffee. The closer we stay to the truth, the easier it will be to maintain the illusion. We'll say we met when you consulted on a design project for one of my companies. A professional relationship that evolved into something more. The practiced ease with which he constructed this fiction was telling. You've thought this through. I leave nothing to chance, he replied. You'll need to be prepared for questions, for scrutiny. The people in my circle are observant, suspicious by nature. What circle is that exactly? I pressed, still trying to understand the world I was agreeing to enter. Mr. Castellanos' eyes narrowed slightly. Wealthy? Powerful? Competitive? The specifics aren't your concern, but they were. If I was going to convincingly play the role of his partner, I decided to try another approach. Tell me about yourself. If I'm supposed to be your girlfriend, I should know basic things about you. Your first name, for starters. He studied me for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Gabriel," he said finally. "My name is Gabriel Castellano." "Gabriel," I repeated, testing the name. It suited him somehow. Biblical, powerful. "And where are you from originally? Your accent has hints of something I can't quite place." "My father was Italian. My mother, American." His answers were clipped, factual. "I was born in New York, spent summers in Sicily until I was 16. "Family?" His expression hardened. "None living." The finality in his tone suggested this was not a topic to pursue. I changed direction. "How old are you?" 42. "Favorite color?" A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "Is this relevant?" "Yes," I insisted. "These are things people know about their partners. Small details matter in creating a convincing story." He conceded with a slight nod. "Blue. Dark blue." "Favorite food?" "I don't have preferences. I appreciate quality in all forms." I rolled my eyes before I could stop myself. "Everyone has preferences, Gabriel." The use of his first name hung in the air between us. For a moment, I thought I'd overstepped, but then the corner of his mouth curved upward. Not quite a smile, but close. "Seafood," he said after a moment. "Particularly grilled octopus, prepared the way my grandmother made it." It was the first personal detail he'd offered voluntarily, and I seized on it. "Tell me about your grandmother." Something softened in his eyes, so briefly I might have imagined it. "Another time, perhaps." He glanced at his watch. "I have business to attend to this morning. Mrs. Chen will assist you with anything you need. We'll continue this conversation over dinner." He stood, adjusting his suit jacket with a practiced motion. "I've taken the liberty of having your belongings moved from your apartment." I blinked in surprise. "My belongings? Your clothes, personal items, anything that appeared to hold sentimental value." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if breaking into my apartment was a trivial matter. "They're being delivered this afternoon." "How did you—" I began, then stopped. Of course. He knew where Ryan lived. He'd sent someone to my apartment, our apartment, to collect my things. What if Ryan had been there? "He wasn't," Gabriel replied simply. "He spent the night at a bar downtown, then crashed at a friend's place on Lexington Avenue. He's been calling your phone repeatedly, growing increasingly agitated." The casual way he relayed this information, the level of surveillance it implied, should have terrified me. Instead, I felt an unsettling mix of gratitude and awe at his thoroughness. "My phone is dead," I said. "I left the charger behind. A new phone will be provided. Your old number will be deactivated." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One last thing, Olivia. From this moment forward, you're under my protection. That means you follow my instructions without question, when it comes to your safety. Is that clear?" The command in his voice was unmistakable. "Yes," I agreed, though a small part of me rebelled at the implied ownership in his words. "Good. I'll return at 7. Be ready for dinner. We'll be dining in." With that, he left, his footsteps fading down the hallway. I remained at the table, staring at my half-eaten breakfast. What had I just agreed to? 6 months of my life signed away to a man I barely knew, a man who clearly wielded enormous power and had no compunction about using it. Yet beneath the fear and uncertainty, I felt something else, a strange sense of possibility. For 3 years I'd been shrinking myself to survive Ryan's rage and control. Now I was stepping into a different kind of controlled existence, but one that paradoxically offered more freedom than I'd known in years. I would have a job, my own money, safety, and eventually, a completely new life. All I had to do was convince the world I was in love with Gabriel Castellano, a man who collected people's secrets like others collected art, who spoke of permanent solutions with chilling casualness, who had orchestrated this entire scenario with methodical precision, a man who, despite his cold exterior, had shown me more consideration in one day than Ryan had in our final year together. I finished my coffee, which had gone cold. 6 months. I could do this for 6 months. I would be whatever Gabriel Castellano needed me to be in public. I would smile, make pleasant conversation, observe without intruding. and I would try very, very hard not to think about what might happen if I failed. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Reese? If you're finished, I can show you the rest of the apartment. The areas you'll have access to." The phrasing, "areas you'll have access to," was telling. There would be places I wasn't permitted to go, questions I wasn't permitted to ask, boundaries I would need to learn quickly. "Yes, thank you," I said, rising from my chair. "And please, call me Olivia." She gave me a small, measured smile. "Of course, Miss Olivia. This way, please." As I followed her from the dining room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, evaluated, that this was some kind of test, and that Gabriel Castellano was a man who did not tolerate failure. I straightened my shoulders, lifting my chin slightly. Whatever game this was, whatever role I had been cast in, I would play it perfectly. Not just for the promised freedom at the end, but for myself, to prove that I could. Because for the first time in 3 years, I felt something that had been beaten and bullied out of me for so long. I felt powerful. The apartment was even larger than I'd initially thought, with sections I hadn't seen the night before. Mrs. Chen guided me through a home gym equipped with state-of-the-art machines, a small but comprehensive library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a home office that remained firmly closed. "Mr. Castellano's private workspace," she explained as we passed. "No entry without his explicit permission." I nodded, filing away this boundary. The rest of the tour revealed more of the same controlled luxury, spaces designed for comfort and efficiency, rather than warmth or personality. The only exceptions were the books in the library, which showed signs of actual use, with well-worn spines and occasional notations in the margins. I ran my fingers along them, noting titles on business strategy, art, history, and, surprisingly, classic literature. "Mr. Castellano reads a lot?" I asked. Mrs. Chen nodded. "Every night. Says it calms his mind." It was a humanizing detail I tucked away. Gabriel Castellano, the man who spoke of permanent solutions with chilling ease, unwinding with Dostoevsky and Dickens. "Your work area," Mrs. Chen announced, leading me into a bright room I hadn't seen before. Unlike the minimalist aesthetic of the rest of the apartment, this space was equipped with a drafting table, a high-end computer setup, and various design supplies. Mr. Castellano had it prepared this morning. I stared at the setup, stunned by the speed with which he'd fulfilled my request. "This is... mine?" "For design work," she confirmed. "He said you start Monday with the company but can practice here." My fingers trailed over the expensive equipment, a tablet that cost more than 3 months of my former rent, software I'd only dreamed of using. How did he arrange all this so quickly? Mrs. Chen gave me an inscrutable look. "Mr. Castellano gets what he wants, when he wants it." The statement should have unsettled me, but instead, I felt a strange flutter of excitement. For once, what Gabriel wanted aligned with what I wanted, at least in this small way. The rest of the day passed in a surreal blur. My belongings arrived as promised, 3 boxes containing the entirety of my previous life. I unpacked slowly, savoring the familiar items that now seemed like artifacts from another world. My worn sketchbooks, the small ceramic bird my mother had given me before she died, photos I'd kept hidden from Ryan, who'd been jealous of anyone from my past. At 5:30, Mrs. Chen appeared at my door. "Time to prepare for dinner. Mr. Castellano appreciates punctuality." She helped me select an outfit from the new wardrobe, a simple black dress that looked casual, but was clearly expensive, and suggested I use the cosmetics provided to freshen up. The implication was clear. I was expected to look the part of Gabriel Castellano's partner, even for a private dinner. At precisely 7 I made my way to the dining room, where Gabriel was already waiting. He'd changed from his business suit into more casual attire, dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that somehow looked as formal on him as the suit had. His eyes moved over me with that now familiar assessing gaze. "Better," he said simply. I raised an eyebrow. "Better than what?" "Than this morning. You look rested." He pulled out a chair for me, an oddly gentlemanly gesture from a man I was increasingly certain was anything but gentle in his business dealings. "Thank you for the design setup," I said as I took my seat. "It's incredibly generous." He dismissed my gratitude with a slight wave. "It's practical. You'll need to be properly equipped to perform well at your job. A server I hadn't seen before appeared with wine, pouring for both of us before disappearing through a door I presumed led to the kitchen. You have staff besides Mrs. Chen, I observed. When necessary, Gabriel replied. I value my privacy, but certain occasions call for additional support. This dinner being one of them? The corner of his mouth curved slightly. I wanted to focus on our conversation without distractions. The first course arrived, some kind of delicate seafood appetizer. Gabriel watched as I took a bite, that almost smile appearing again when I couldn't suppress a sound of appreciation. You have questions, he said, reaching for his wine glass. Ask them. I set down my fork. The contract mentioned public appearances. What exactly does that entail? There's a charity gala next Friday. It will be your first official appearance as my partner. He took a sip of wine. Before that, we'll be seen at several restaurants, establishing our relationship publicly. Creating a timeline that predates your situation with Ryan. You've thought of everything, I murmured. It's what I do. His eyes held mine. The gala will be challenging. Many of my business associates will be there, curious about you. We'll need to be convincing. I'm a good actress, I assured him, though my stomach twisted at the thought of being scrutinized by a room full of powerful strangers. I'm sure you are, he replied. But this isn't acting, Olivia, not entirely. For this to work, there needs to be a kernel of truth in our performance. Chemistry can't be faked, not convincingly. My cheeks warmed at the implication. What are you suggesting? That we get to know each other properly. He leaned back as the server removed our plates and brought the main course. You asked about my grandmother earlier. She raised me after my parents died. Car accident when I was 8. She was a formidable woman from the old country, with very particular ideas about honor, family, and respect. The personal revelation caught me off guard. I'm sorry about your parents. He inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement. She taught me to cook, to appreciate quality, to value loyalty above all else. She died when I was 26. And you've been alone since then? I asked, thinking of the solitary photograph I'd seen. Something shuddered in his expression. I've been selective about my associations. I sensed another boundary, another door firmly closed. I changed direction. My mother died when I was in college. Cancer. My father had already been gone for years, walked out when I was 12. Gabriel nodded, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. So, we both understand loss. Is that why you're helping me? I asked. Because you recognize something familiar in my situation? He studied me for a long moment. Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply saw an opportunity that served both our interests. What interest does my presence serve for you, exactly? I pressed. You still haven't really explained that. Gabriel cut his food with precise movements. There are expectations in my position. A man of my age and status is supposed to have certain attachments, a partner, the appearance of stability. And you couldn't find someone willingly? I challenged, immediately regretting my boldness. But Gabriel didn't seem offended. If anything, that ghost of a smile appeared again. Willing partners come with complications, expectations, emotional entanglements. He took a sip of wine. Our arrangement is cleaner, defined, with a clear end date. 6 months, I murmured. 6 months, he confirmed, during which time we establish a convincing relationship. You gain experience in your field, and I satisfy certain appearances. Afterward, you start fresh elsewhere, and I return to my solitary existence. The way he described it made perfect sense, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it, something he wasn't telling me. Tell me about your work, he said, changing the subject. Your design background. I blinked at the shift, but followed his lead. I have a BFA in graphic design from RISD. I graduated with honors, had an internship lined up at a great firm in New York. I paused, the familiar bitterness rising. Then I met Ryan. He convinced me the internship was exploitative, that I should wait for something better. Before I knew it, I was working retail jobs that he approved of, living in his apartment, isolated from anyone who might negatively influence me. Gabriel's expression darkened. Men like Ryan don't want partners. They want possessions. I know that now, I said quietly. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. You got out, he pointed out. Many don't. Thanks to you, I acknowledged, meeting his gaze. Whatever your reasons, I'm grateful for that. Something unreadable flashed in his eyes. Don't thank me yet, Olivia. Our arrangement has barely begun. The rest of dinner passed with surprisingly easy conversation. Gabriel asked intelligent questions about my design interests, offering insights about his company's needs that suggested he'd given genuine thought to my role there. I learned that his business empire was larger than I'd imagined, encompassing everything from real estate to technology investments. What he didn't say, what remained carefully unspoken, was anything about the darker aspects of his work, the problems he solved, the power he wielded so casually. After dessert, he suggested we move to the living room. There's something we need to discuss before Friday, he said, leading the way. I followed, noticing how he moved, confident, but always alert, his eyes scanning rooms before entering them fully. In the living room, he gestured for me to sit on the sofa while he poured 2 small glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. The physical aspects of our arrangement, he said, handing me one of the glasses before taking a seat in the armchair across from me. I nearly choked on my first sip. I thought you said there were no physical obligations. There aren't, he clarified, his expression unreadable. But for our performance to be convincing, there will need to be certain displays of affection, hand-holding, the occasional touch, perhaps even a kiss, if circumstances demand it. My cheeks warmed at the thought. I see. These interactions should appear natural, comfortable, which means we need to establish a level of familiarity beforehand. He set his glass down. I don't want you flinching if I touch your arm in public. The implication was clear. We needed to practice. My pulse quickened traitorously. What do you suggest? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Gabriel considered me for a moment. Stand up. I did, setting my glass beside his. He rose as well, closing the distance between us with 2 measured steps. Up close, I was again struck by the controlled power in his movements, the subtle cologne that clung to him, the intensity of his dark eyes. May I? He asked, his voice low. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movements, and placed his hand on my shoulder. Even through the fabric of my dress, I could feel the warmth of his palm. His touch was light but firm, nothing like Ryan's bruising grip. This is the simplest form of contact, he said, his voice taking on an instructional tone that somehow made the situation both more and less intimate. A hand on your shoulder, your back, your arm, guiding, not controlling. He demonstrated, his hand sliding to my upper back, applying the gentlest pressure to guide me half a step closer. I moved willingly, caught in the strange bubble of this lesson. Hand-holding, he continued, letting his hand fall from my back and extending it palm up between us. This will be expected. I placed my hand in his, surprised at how normal it felt. How right, somehow, despite the clinical nature of the exercise. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, but never gripping too tightly, just present. Secure. Good, he murmured. You don't tense when I touch you. That's important. His approval shouldn't have pleased me as much as it did. I withdrew my hand, needing to re-establish some distance. Anything else I should know about these displays? Something flickered in his eyes, amusement perhaps, or challenge. There will be moments when more intimate contact may be necessary, a kiss on the cheek, for instance. My breath caught as he stepped closer again, his hand coming up to gently brush a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender, that I forgot this was supposed to be a demonstration. May I? He asked again, his voice lower now. I nodded, unable to look away from his face. He leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull back. and pressed his lips lightly to my cheek. It was barely a touch, over almost before it began, and yet it sent a ripple of awareness through my entire body. When he pulled back, his expression was unreadable, but I thought I detected a slight darkening of his eyes, a tightness around his mouth that hadn't been there before. "That should suffice for most situations," he said, his voice perfectly controlled again as he stepped back. "If anything more is ever required, we'll discuss it beforehand." I nodded, not trusting my voice. What was happening to me? This was a business arrangement, a transaction. The fact that Gabriel Castellano was handsome in his severe way shouldn't matter. The fact that his touch made my skin tingle shouldn't matter, but it did. "There's one other thing we should address," he said, returning to his seat and retrieving his glass. "Ryan." The name crashed through the strange tension between us, a harsh reminder of reality. "What about him?" I asked, sinking back onto the sofa. "He's been asking about you, at your former workplace among your acquaintances." Gabriel's expression hardened. He's getting desperate, angry. A chill ran down my spine. "How do you know this?" "I'm having him watched," Gabriel said simply, "for your safety, and to ensure he doesn't become a problem for our arrangement." The casual way he admitted to surveillance should have disturbed me. Instead, I felt an unsettling combination of fear and relief. "Do you think he'll find me?" Gabriel shook his head. "No, but he's becoming increasingly volatile. We need to defuse the situation." "How?" "We'll be seen together, publicly. Establish our relationship as something that predates your departure." He took a sip of his drink. "When Ryan inevitably learns of this, he'll draw his own conclusions. It will shift his anger, redirect it. Toward you," I realized. Gabriel's smile was cold. "Let him try." The quiet confidence in his voice reminded me of who I was dealing with. A man who spoke of permanent solutions, and had people followed without a second thought. A man who, despite his cultured exterior, was clearly dangerous. "What will you do if he comes after you?" I asked. "Handle it," Gabriel replied simply. "But he won't. Men like Ryan are cowards at heart. They prey on those they perceive as weaker. When confronted with real power, they fold." The certainty in his voice was comforting, even as it raised more questions about who exactly Gabriel Castellano was. What had I aligned myself with? What forces had I invited into my life by accepting his offer? "I should warn you," he continued, "that establishing our relationship publicly means you'll be photographed. Noticed. It's unavoidable in my position." The implication was clear. Once I was seen with Gabriel, there would be no going back to anonymity. No changing my mind and slipping away. "I understand," I said. He studied me for a moment. "Do you?" "Once this begins, Olivia, we're committed to seeing it through, for your safety as much as for my purposes." "I said I understand," I repeated, meeting his gaze. "I'm not backing out." Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. "Good. Tomorrow we'll be having lunch at Bellini's. It's a popular spot for business executives. A good place to be seen together for the first time." He rose, indicating our conversation was drawing to a close. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be the first test of our arrangement." I stood as well, suddenly aware of how close we were standing, how easy it would be to reach out and touch him again. The thought startled me with its intensity. "Good night, Gabriel," I said, using his first name deliberately, testing how it felt on my lips. His eyes darkened almost imperceptibly. "Good night, Olivia." I made my way back to my room, my mind spinning. In just 2 days, my entire life had been upended. I'd gone from being Ryan's prisoner to being... what exactly? Gabriel's pretend girlfriend? His employee? His project? Whatever this was, whatever Gabriel's true motives, I was committed now. In less than 24 hours, we would be appearing in public together, beginning the charade that would define the next 6 months of my life. As I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The same woman I'd been 2 days ago, and yet somehow completely different. There was color in my cheeks, a spark in my eyes that had been missing for years. I touched my cheek where Gabriel's lips had brushed it, the phantom sensation still lingering on my skin. This was dangerous, this flutter in my chest whenever he looked at me. This wasn't part of our arrangement. But as I slipped between the luxurious sheets, I couldn't help wondering if Gabriel felt it too. That unexpected spark, that pull between us, that had nothing to do with our contract, and everything to do with the way his eyes lingered on mine, the careful gentleness of his touch. 6 months, I reminded myself firmly. This was a 6-month arrangement, nothing more. I would play my part perfectly, take advantage of the opportunities it offered, and then move on to my new life. Away from Ryan, away from Gabriel, away from everything. So why did that future suddenly feel less like freedom and more like another kind of loss? Morning light filtered through the automated blinds, gradually brightening my room as if nature itself was being controlled by Gabriel's meticulous preferences. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts of our upcoming public debut. By this afternoon, whatever this arrangement was, would become real to the outside world. I selected a deep blue dress from the wardrobe, remembering Gabriel's admission that it was his favorite color, and spent more time than usual with my appearance. The woman in the mirror looked polished, sophisticated, worthy of being on the arm of someone like Gabriel Castellano. But beneath that carefully constructed exterior, anxiety churned. When I emerged from my room, Gabriel was waiting in the foyer, checking his watch. He looked up as I approached, his gaze moving over me in that now familiar assessment. "Blue suits you," he said, his voice giving nothing away, yet something in his eyes, a brief flash of appreciation, sent warmth spreading through my chest. "Thank you," I replied, suddenly hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. "I remember you mentioned it was your favorite color." The slightest hint of surprise crossed his features. There and gone in an instant. "You pay attention. Good." In the elevator, he briefed me on what to expect. Bellini's caters to a certain clientele. People who know me, know of me, will be noticed, observed. His eyes met mine. "Are you ready for that?" I squared my shoulders. "Yes." "Remember," he said as the elevator doors opened to the private garage. "As far as anyone knows, we've been seeing each other for 2 months. You're a designer who caught my eye during a project for one of my companies. And we've been inseparable ever since," I finished, offering a smile that I hoped appeared natural. "I know the story, Gabriel." His car waited, not the one I'd hidden in that rainy night, but an equally luxurious sedan with a different driver at the wheel. Not Vince this time, but a lean, hawk-faced man who nodded respectfully as Gabriel opened my door himself. "Marcus," Gabriel said by way of introduction. "He'll be with us most days." The message was clear. Another layer of security, another reminder of the world I was entering. The drive to the restaurant passed in silence, Gabriel reviewing something on his phone while I watched the city scroll past the tinted windows. When we arrived, Marcus pulled up directly to the entrance where a valet was already waiting, clearly recognizing the vehicle. "Follow my lead," Gabriel murmured as the door opened. "But be yourself, that's important." Before I could ask what he meant, he was out of the car, extending his hand to help me. As my fingers met his, I felt that same inexplicable jolt of connection. His hand moved to the small of my back as we approached the entrance, possessive but not controlling, exactly as he'd demonstrated the night before. The maitre d' practically bowed when he saw Gabriel. "Mr. Castellano, always a pleasure. Your usual table is ready." As we moved through the restaurant, I became acutely aware of the attention we attracted. Conversations paused briefly as we passed, eyes following our progress, subtle nods of acknowledgement directed at Gabriel. He returned these with minimal gestures. A slight inclination of his head, a brief meeting of eyes, that nonetheless conveyed recognition and a certain hierarchical understanding. Our table was positioned perfectly, private enough for conversation but visible to the right people. Gabriel pulled out my chair, his hand brushing my shoulder as I sat. Even that brief contact felt charged with meaning. "Relax," he said quietly as he took his own seat. "You look like you're heading to your execution rather than having lunch with your lover." The word lover sent heat rushing to my cheeks. "Sorry, I'm not used to being the center of attention." "You're not," he corrected. "I am. You're simply the new variable people are curious about." A waiter appeared with water and wine without being summoned. Gabriel didn't bother with a menu, simply saying, The usual for me, and he looked at me expectantly. I'd like to see a menu, please, I said, refusing to be ordered for despite our arrangement. Gabriel's lips twitched, almost a smile. When the waiter returned with a leather-bound menu, I selected a dish at random, more focused on the performance we were giving than on food. Good, Gabriel said once the waiter had gone. Assert yourself. It's what would have attracted me to you in the first place. I raised an eyebrow. Is it? A man in my position is surrounded by people who say yes, who bend to my will without question. His eyes held mine across the table. Someone who stands her ground would be refreshing. There was something genuine in his voice that caught me off guard. Before I could respond, his attention shifted to something over my shoulder. James, he said, rising slightly as a silver-haired man approached our table. I didn't expect to see you here. Gabriel, the man replied, his eyes flicking curiously to me. I'm meeting with the board from Westridge. You remember that acquisition we discussed? Of course. Gabriel's hand found mine on the table, his thumb stroking lightly over my knuckles in a gesture that appeared absent-minded, but felt deliberately intimate. James, this is Olivia Reese. Olivia, James Harrington, an old friend, an occasional business partner. I offered my free hand, which James took with old-world courtesy. A pleasure, Ms. Reese. I don't believe Gabriel has mentioned you before. We've been keeping things private, Gabriel replied smoothly. You know how I value my personal life. James's eyebrows rose slightly. Indeed. Well, I won't interrupt your lunch. Perhaps we could all have dinner sometime. I'd like that, I said before Gabriel could respond, earning an approving squeeze of my hand. After James departed, the performance continued. Throughout lunch, various associates stopped by our table, each interaction a carefully choreographed dance where I played the role of the enchanting new partner, while Gabriel maintained his usual controlled facade, with just enough softening around the edges to suggest genuine affection. It was exhausting and exhilarating all at once. By the time we finished dessert, which Gabriel insisted on sharing in a display that was clearly for the benefit of onlookers, I felt like I'd run an emotional marathon. You did well, he said as we waited for the car. Better than I expected. Thanks for the vote of confidence, I replied dryly. His hand found the small of my back again as Marcus pulled up. I mean it. You were natural, charming. People believed us. Isn't that what you're paying me for? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Gabriel's expression darkened slightly as he helped me into the car. Once inside, with the privacy divider raised, he turned to me. Is that how you see this? Strictly transactional? Isn't it? I challenged, suddenly needing clarity amid the confusing mix of real and pretend. You made the terms quite clear. 6 months, then we part ways. He studied me for a long moment. The terms remain. But that doesn't mean what happens between now and then must be cold or impersonal. My heart stuttered in my chest. What exactly are you saying, Gabriel? Before he could answer, his phone rang. The transformation was immediate, his expression shuddering, his body tensing as he checked the caller ID. I need to take this, he said, his voice suddenly all business. Driver, take us to Kingsley Tower immediately. The call itself was brief, conducted in such quiet tones that I couldn't make out the substance. But the effect on Gabriel was unmistakable. Whatever warmth had been developing between us vanished, replaced by the cold, controlled man I'd first met. Change of plans, he said, after ending the call. I have business to attend to. Marcus will take you back to the apartment. Is everything okay? I ventured. It's being handled. His voice left no room for further questions. When we arrived at a sleek skyscraper downtown, Gabriel turned to me. Wait here, he instructed Marcus. Then to me, more softly. We'll continue our conversation later. As I watched him stride into the building, his posture rigid with controlled power, I was reminded of the reality behind our arrangement. Whatever was happening between us, this strange, unexpected pull, was secondary to who Gabriel Castellano really was. A man with secrets, with power, with a darkness I'd only glimpsed. Back at the apartment, hours passed with no word from Gabriel. Mrs. Chen assured me this was normal, that he often worked late. I tried to distract myself in the design room, but my mind kept returning to our interrupted conversation in the car, to the question that hung between us. It was after midnight when I heard the front door. Unable to sleep, I'd been curled up in the library with one of Gabriel's books. I rose as he appeared in the doorway. His tie loosened, a weariness in his posture I hadn't seen before. "You're still awake," he observed, his voice rough with fatigue. "I was worried," I admitted. "You left so suddenly." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps. "It was business. Nothing for you to concern yourself with." Was it about Ryan? The question escaped before I could stop it. Gabriel went still. "Why would you ask that?" "Because everything changed after James mentioned meeting you. Because you've had Ryan watched. Because what, Olivia?" His voice had taken on a dangerous edge. "Because there's something you're not telling me," I said, standing my ground despite the sudden tension in the room. "Something about why you really offered me this arrangement." For a long moment he said nothing, just studied me with those dark, unreadable eyes. Then, with a sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him, he moved to the small bar in the corner and poured himself a drink. "Ryan Jenkins works for James Harrington," he said finally. "Or rather, he embezzles from him. Has been for over a year." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "But Ryan works at Meridian Financial, which manages several of Harrington's investment portfolios." Gabriel took a long sip of his drink. "We've been building a case against him for months. Your ex-boyfriend has stolen nearly $2 million from my oldest business partner." My mind raced to process this information. "So, when I appeared in your car that night, it wasn't coincidence," Gabriel confirmed. "I knew who you were the moment you said your name. We'd been monitoring Ryan, knew about his tendencies with you." His jaw tightened. "What I didn't anticipate was that you would choose that particular night to leave him." "You've been using me," I said, the hurt surprising in its intensity. "This whole arrangement, it was never about helping me or needing a companion. It was about getting to Ryan." Gabriel set down his glass and stepped closer. "It started that way," he admitted. "But it changed, Olivia. It changed the moment I saw those bruises on your arms, heard you talk about what he'd done to you." "Why should I believe you?" I demanded, even as some part of me desperately wanted to. "Because I could have handled Ryan without you," he said simply. "Could have destroyed him financially, legally, personally, without ever involving you. But when you appeared in my car that night, terrified, hurt, but still fighting, I saw an opportunity to give you something while taking what I needed from him." "What exactly are you taking from him?" Gabriel's eyes darkened. "Everything. His freedom, when the evidence of his embezzlement is turned over to the authorities tomorrow. His pride, when he sees you with me. His sense of power, when he realizes he never had any to begin with." The cold certainty in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of justice. "That's why you had my things collected from the apartment. You were gathering evidence against him." Gabriel nodded once, among other things. "Why tell me now?" I asked. "Why not maintain the illusion?" He moved closer, close enough that I could see the fatigue lines around his eyes, smell the familiar cologne mingled with the scent of his skin. "Because tonight, when James mentioned meeting you, I realized something had changed. This wasn't just about Ryan anymore." My heart hammered in my chest. "What was it about then?" "You," he said simply. "The way you challenged me, the way you stood your ground today, even knowing who I am, what I'm capable of. The way you've somehow found space in this cold place I've built for myself." His hand reached up, hesitating before gently touching my cheek. Unlike our practiced interactions earlier, this touch held nothing performative. It was real, raw, with an emotion I hadn't believed him capable of. "Our arrangement still stands," he said, his voice low. 6 months, and then you're free to go, with everything I promised. But I find myself hoping you might reconsider when the time comes." I should have been angry, should have felt betrayed by the manipulation. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw something I recognized. the same loneliness I'd carried for years, the same protective walls I'd built around my heart. I don't know what this is between us, I admitted, but I'd like to find out. Honestly this time. No more secrets. Gabriel's thumb stroked my cheek. No more secrets, he agreed. Starting tomorrow, after Ryan is dealt with. A clean slate. A clean slate, I echoed, leaning into his touch. When his lips found mine, there was nothing practiced or performative about it. It was a question, an answer, a promise all at once, a beginning rather than an arrangement. Outside, the city lights glittered like stars caught in a net of darkness. Inside, in the circle of Gabriel's arms, I found something I'd stopped believing in, not just safety, but possibility. A future that wasn't mapped out in contract clauses and termination dates, but in moments like this, real and imperfect and entirely ours.